Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today's guest is the philanthropic producer, arranger, songwriter, governor of California, and founder of Curb Records, Mike Curb. When we come back, Mike Curb. All right, we're back at Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage with Mike Curb. Mike, thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, I've been wanting to do this interview for a long, long time. I want to tell a little story before we get started. When we got, our first museum was taken to build a new convention center. And the first phone call we got was from you. And I'll never forget that because we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know where we were going to go. It happened so quick, with 2 years you'd been sitting around waiting for it to happen. Then, you get 7 days to move out, and we were like stunned. And we get this call from you, and it was just kind of a ray of sunlight for the first time. And we never will be able to thank you enough for doing that, for giving us. Mike gave us offices over at the Curb School of Music, formerly CBS Records. Actually, he gave me my little office back plus a bunch more. And
Well, you made the office famous.
I didn't, but
And we were, and I've always been a big fan of particularly Musicians Hall of Fame. Everything you've done, it's just so great.
Well, thank you so much.
We were sad when you had to make that move, but I think it turned out to be even for the better, didn't it?
I think most times things do work out for the best. I think but my wife said we got kicked to the curb, and that was you, and it was a good kick because that did give us time to get all this worked out, and once again and you were also the very first person that was the industry icon inductee here for all the things that you've done for so many people, and we've including us. And I just wanted you to know up front how much we really appreciate everything.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate everything you're doing for the community and for the country with this magnificent hall here that you've built.
Well, there's one more thing I want to say. So one day I get a phone call from Mike, and you say, would you mind if I bring the head of the Grammy Museum over? And I'm like, no. And next thing I know, Mike has introduced the Grammy Museum in LA to us, and within 6 months we had a deal to have the Grammy Gallery, 9,400 square foot Grammy Gallery here, which has been a tremendous addition.
It was great for them. It was great for the Grammys, and it was obviously great for you. So,
like they said, it was
a good combination.
It was a hand and glove fit. It was perfect, and we owe all that to you as well. So, okay, I just wanted to get that out of the way.
They were obviously very impressed when they saw what you've done here. So it's just been a wonderful way of bringing the Grammys here to Nashville.
Honestly, it took someone like you to get them here, and we appreciate it. So, okay, your dad was a FBI agent.
Right.
And you're Savannah, Georgia.
Yes.
And what happened? And what got you to where you were?
He was an FBI agent. He was, I was born in Savannah, and then he was transferred to Charleston, and then to Oklahoma, and then to Arizona, and eventually, of all places, California, Compton, right near Watts, which was actually a great way to start school because you're in that wonderful community, African American community, and music is such a important fabric for the whole community. Even I remember when our family went to a Baptist church downtown that was all white, the music sounded so drab and almost like you were dying. And then all of a sudden, when my father was traveling, I would get to go to the black churches in Compton, and wow, I mean, they were rocking, and you really heard. It was like R&B. Well, it is R&B music. It's gospel music, and I don't know where the line is between gospel and R&B, but it was very close back then, and it was a great way to be introduced to music and a great way to learn to play the piano and learn from people who really had the feel, because so much of playing the piano is your feel and the rhythm, and to learn it that way and to learn the different bass chords and everything in the black churches was a wonderful thing.
Elvis, I think, did about the same thing you did.
He did a little better though. He seemed to accomplish a little more, but
I don't think so really. But how did you learn how to play? Did you have formal lessons, or did you learn on your own?
a little bit of formal, hardly any. But I used to we had an old piano on it. For some reason, I played by ear. But I'm not great, but I play. I enjoy playing, and I was able to be in a band in school, and then we had hit records with our band, and then later on with the My Curb Congregation, we had several hits, and we were regulars on the Glenn Campbell show every week. It was an exciting time to at least pretend to be an artist for a period of time.
So your first band was in California?
Yes. What I learned though when I moved to Nashville is don't try to play alongside these guys. Don't try to write songs better than it's better. When I moved to Nashville 27 years ago, I said, I'm going to stick to the business side. There's too many guys that write. Everybody here writes better than I do. Everybody here is a better musician. It's this town, the musicianship. Well, from the Musicians Hall of Fame, what happens and what's happened in Nashville. Going back to the Ryman, going back to RCA Studio B, and all the studios, even the studios that we've been buying and renovating. These musicians from the A-team, they set a bar that's so high that you would never want to play in front of them.
Well, people ask me, are you a musician? And I say, well, I thought so until I got to Nashville.
That's what,
and
that was the way I felt too.
And then I said, well, I better look at songwriting, So how old were you when you started to perform professionally?
Oh, I was a teenager when I first started, and then we got lucky.
Keyboards always?
Keyboards, a little bit of guitar, but mostly keyboards. But we had our first hit, I think, in 1964, 1965. We did Apache 65, actually it was called. We released it in '64, and it was our first Billboard. It went halfway up the Billboard chart, but it made it on the national chart. So, and it happened. It was a big hit regionally out in California, and then it just spread around the country. And then we had several other chart records. Our band was called the Arrows, and then I started.
How did that happen? How did you get on record?
I had to start a record company.
So you started that record company?
I started my Curb Records. Originally, we couldn't get the name Curb because there was a company called Cub, C-U-B, that MGM owned. So we called it Sidewalk because it was close to Curb. Mm-hmm. And then we put out, the first record was Apache on Sidewalk. And then we signed the Stone Ponies, which was Linda Ronstadt's group, and then made her first records.
Okay, how old were you?
I was 18 when I started.
How do you start a record label at 18 years old and get distribution and everything?
It was very small.
So, see, people need to understand, and that's one, I went and took the stage out of the Jolly Roger Club in Prisoner's Alley and put it here to let people see that Hendrix didn't start at Woodstock, and you didn't start with a massive record label. You started from the bottom and worked your way up.
I would say that's true. I don't think you could have started further down than I did.
Yeah.
But it's been an exciting run.
Yeah. And you know it from the ground up too.
No, and the exciting thing is we're having hits now again this year. Yeah. We're having a really good year for King and Country and with Lee Brice and Dylan Scott and Rodney Atkins, and We Are Messengers and Natalie Grant and Francesca, and it just turned out to be. This is a really positive time for our company, and we're crossing records over to the pop charts now.
Lee Brice's record crossed, didn't it?
Yeah, it's in the top 20 of the Billboard Pop Chart, and then of course for King Country's up there in the top 20 as well there, and both records have been on the Hot 100, and I think Lee was in the top 25, which is an incredible thing when a record that goes #1 on the country chart like Rumor by Lee Brice and then crosses over, hits the top 25 of the Hot 100, and then the top 20 of the AC chart, and just keeps going, and it could go all the way. Yeah. It's a fantastic record. It sounds like one of those Stax R&B records. It has such a great feel to it.
Yeah. And my son actually works for Lee.
Well, something, I think Lee may be an R&B singer and just never told us, because
I think
he's got
George
so
Jo-
much soul. I mean, it's just unbelievable what the talent he has.
I always thought George Jones was a soul singer. I mean, I really did. I mean, you could take he took a word and made a sentence out of
Yeah.
it. You know.
I know.
But so getting back to California though, because you did so much out there. You did movie scores. You did commercials, Honda commercials, right?
Yes.
And you wrote them all.
Back then I wrote them. You know, I wrote the Honda commercial and the Chevrolet commercial, and then I used to write this for the soundtracks, like the Wild Angels, the Peter Fonda movie. I would actually write the music for the score and write the theme songs. Then as time marched on, we had other people with the company that could actually do a better job, and then we at one point I think we did over 50 soundtracks to those West Coast rock and roll movies back in the 60s.
And if you don't mind, tell the story of Sammy Davis.
Sammy had been on Motown Records, and nothing happened. Barry Gordy tried everything with him, and then he was getting off Motown and looking for a place to go. I met his manager, Cy Marsh, and I had a song that my group, the My Curb Congregation, had recorded called the Candyman, but I had released it and I had had a big hit with Burning Bridges from the Kelly's Heroes movie, that I followed it with the Candyman, and nothing happened. And I couldn't figure out how could my follow-up not be making it, what's wrong? And I realized it was boring. And then so I asked Sammy, I said, Sammy, while we're looking for what to record on your first album, why don't you sing the Candyman? It's from the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's a fun record. And he said, no, it's white bread, it's terrible. That's not what I want to do. I've been on Motown. So
Didn't he say I can't go to my neighborhood or something like that?
something like, it's in his book. I mean, he writes about how much he didn't want to do it. And then finally he said, well, what the heck, you already have the track. I'll just go put my voice on it. So he said, I'll make 2 takes. And he made 2 takes. We spliced them together and really made it a duet, because he never did sing part of the chorus. So I just dialed my group in. We put the record out, and I thought, this will get us on the charts, and then we give us time to do our album. The darn record went all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was the most amazing thing. And for the rest of his life, they called him the Candyman. And then we did Mr. Bojangles for the follow-up, and it was a hit. And in fact, in his book, he said, how would I believe the 2 biggest songs that I ever recorded would have happened so quickly by accident? And of course, I never knew that. Of course, Bojangles had been the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I just thought it'd be a fun thing for Sammy. Well, he made it his own.
Right.
That doesn't take anything away from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. They were great, but Sammy took that song and it was like he was
Right.
that person.
Yeah.
Wow.
And after that, he never argued with you about doing the song again, did he?
Well, yes, he did everything. No, I'm just kidding. No, he was amazing talent.
Yeah.
He knew what he wanted to do, and he it was fun to work with him. I miss it. I wish I were doing it today.
Yeah. What made you decide to move to Nashville?
We started signing artists when we were in California. The president of my company was a man named Dick Whitehouse, and he was just a wonderful person. For 35 years, he was the CEO. I don't think I'll ever meet anyone like him again in my life. He's still alive, still one of our trustees, but he retired a while back. But he was thinking of retirement back then, and we were having hits though with the Judds. We were in California, but we were having hits with the Judds. But then we would have to make an arrangement with Art.
How did you get the Judds in California?
Well, how did we get the Judds?
Yeah.
That's a great story. I think Brent Mayer, if I'm not mistaken, Brent Mayer's daughter Diana, I think, was in the hospital, and I think Naomi Judd was the nurse.
Right.
And they talked, and Naomi, was obviously, she was. No one would say that Naomi isn't aggressive. I mean, she's just been marvelous in the way she's promoted the Judds and what she's done in her life. Look at both of her daughters, Winona and Ashley, are both very successful. So, and Naomi did it all as a single mom, but she was a nurse, and she met Brent Mayer's daughter. I think that's
I think
the
she's
story.
in an automobile accident or something, maybe. Yeah.
Something to that
And
effect.
she took
But
care
she
of
was
her?
in the hospital. She took care of her, and she gave her a cassette of what is now the Judds, and it was Winona and Naomi, and then my recollection is that cassette was then given to Woody Bowles, and Woody Bowles was the manager of Mo Bandy, and Mo was on our label at the time, and then they gave it to Brent Mayer, I think, first Diana gave it to Brent, and then Brent gave it to Woody. Woody gave it to Dick Whitehouse, and Dick came out to California and played it for me, and it was like a gospel song. I think it was called "Did You Hear Jerusalem Moan?" It was, at first I thought, this is going to be a gospel group, and that'll fit in because we had Debbie Boone with "You Light Up My Life." We had gospel records, Larry Norman and Second Chapter of Acts. So I thought, maybe we'll make this a gospel record. And Dick said, no, I think it's going to go country. And then we entered into a venture with RCA to do the promotion and set up Curb RCA.
Did you already have a label here though at the time?
Well, yes, we had a label, but we were doing co-ventures to get the marketing and promotion because we were still in California. So we had Curb Warner for Hank Williams Jr. We had Curb Capital for Sawyer Brown. We had Curb RCA for the Judds. We had Curb MCA for Lyle Lovett and the Desert Rose Band and so forth. So we had these co-ventures, but we weren't here. And then that was back in the 80s, and then at the end of the 80s, Joe Smith, who had been at Warner, was now at Capitol. He said, if you'd ever put together all these joint ventures, get those acts back on one label, you'd be pretty. It'd be pretty exciting, So I said, hey Joe, I thought about it, tried it, and we did it. And in 1990 we set up. We brought these artists all back to Curb. So by the end of so then all of a sudden it's early 90s, and we're thinking, wow, here's Winona Judd, here's Hank Williams Jr., here's Tim McGraw, Leanne Rimes, Jody Messina, boy howdy, Sawyer Brown. Could they all come into one label? Well, then we needed to set up our own promotion. We already had a building here. We thought we better move to Nashville and do it right, set up our own promotion team, and we moved here. And wow, it's just been, it's been a wonderful run for the last almost 30 years.
And aren't you the only self-owned or family-owned record label?
Well, we're the oldest. They say we're the oldest one still owned by the original owner. This is our 55th year. I started as a teenager. It's really a long run.
At that point, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to jump to something entirely different. Hang on.
The Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum has been celebrating the men and women who make the music of our lives since 2006. The Musicians Hall of Fame is the one and only museum in the world that honors the talented musicians who played on the greatest recordings of all time.
It's a music city, huh? It's, where else are you going to get the cats, all the cats that are in this room?
The Grammy Museum Gallery at the Musicians Hall of Fame is an interactive facility that allows guests to explore the process of making a recording. Take drum lessons with Ringo Starr. Sing on stage with Ray Charles. Write a song with Desmond Child. Rap with Nelly. Or be Garth Brooks in our recording studio experience. Located in the heart of downtown Nashville, in the first floor of the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Come see what you've heard at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum.
Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame with Mike Curb. So Mike, you're like a cat. You've had like 9 lives, and they're all different. And politics, without getting into anything weird.
Yeah.
But you were the lieutenant governor of California.
Well, that had pluses and minuses. It was. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because I got to spend time with Ronald Reagan, who was a great person, and to be lieutenant governor of the largest state. And I spent about a year as acting governor. So it was. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but it did set me back a little bit in the music business because back then, those guys like David Geffen, Irving Azoff, they were really rocking, and you miss a few years, there, it took me a while to get back into the rhythm of the music business. So it had pluses and minuses.
Well, yeah, because you had to govern the biggest state, right? It's the biggest state in the union, right?
It is. Well,
That's a pretty
yeah,
heavy.
Texas is
Texas,
well.
yeah.
Well, California is the most populous.
Yeah.
I think Texas might be a little bit bigger from the standpoint of the the
So
size.
you didn't have a lot of free time to think about an album cut,
No.
So
And I missed it. I missed it. I was actually lucky to get back into the. I mentioned Dick Whitehouse earlier. He ran my company during that 4-year period and he did a great job.
another thing that you are passionate about is taking care of 501c3s like us and people that need help. I don't know how many organizations that you've not been a huge supporter of. One thing that is on a lot of people's minds is Music Row. I know for a fact that you saved my favorite place, which was the Quonset Hut and Studio A, CBS, and then you saved or savior of the RCA, right?
Well, one of the things, in addition to the philanthropic things we were doing and the homeless programs and education programs that we've been involved in, I really believe in restoration. My wife and I have worked on restoring as much of Music Row as we can. We bought 12 pieces of property. Actually, there's I think 10 buildings. One of them is RCA Studio B, and then RCA Studio A. We're in a partnership with Chuck Elkin and Aubrey Preston.
Aubrey, yeah.
And Aubrey's just incredible what he's done with RCA Studio A. But in addition to RCA Studio A and Studio B, and by the way, RCA Studio B had, I think, over 100,000 people last year visiting. Mm-hmm. And then you have, Columbia Studio A and the Quonset Hut, which was the first studio on Music Row. Anyway, we've restored about 12 properties on Music Row right in the heart of the area. And one of my passions is to make sure that we don't lose Music Row, because there's so many buildings being built and so much development. And if we lose too much more of Music Row, we're losing one of the 7 wonders of the world. People come from all over the world to see Music City, but a big part of Music City is Music Row.
Right. Well, for those of you who don't know, RCA-B was the second studio, I believe, on Music Row. Quonset Hut was the first studio. Technically, I mean, the house that no one brought and Harold bought the basement was the first studio on the row. Right. Then they realized when they built the Quonset Hut, it sounded better. Yeah. And so then that became the Bradley studio. When CBS bought it and built A, then the Quonset Hut became B. But then RCA built B, and then they built A just like CBS did.
They're going to have to follow that one, right?
Right, yeah. But they were going to tear Studio RCA-B down until you bought it.
And Studio A, they were going to tear down as well. RCA
later.
Studio A. Before Aubrey got involved, they were going to tear that down, and it's magnificent now. I mean, it looks. I walked in it the other day with Aubrey, and it looked just like it did back in the day. You know, but the first one was a Quonset Hut, and that was Decca.
Yeah.
And Owen Bradley allegedly was going to be built in Texas, and something happened to the person who was building it, and then so Decca commissioned Owen to build a Quonset Hut.
Yeah.
And that's historic. I mean, Marty Robbins, Brenda Lee, Patsy Cline,
Bobby Vinton.
Oh my goodness! All the Decca records back then,
mm-hmm.
And then later on, as you mentioned, when CBS bought it, then people like Bobby Vinton, Bob Dylan, came out and recorded. I mean, it was just amazing, the history. And then of course RCA responded. RCA didn't want Elvis recording in a Decca studio or a CBS studio, so they built RCA-B, Chet Atkins, and I mean Waylon Jennings, Skeeter Davis, Jim Reeves, Eddie Arnold, Dolly Parton, on and on. I mean, you go on. The great Floyd Kramer. I could sit here mentioning at one time, 1 out of 2 records in America on the pop chart were either cut at the Quonset Hut or cut at RCA Studio B.
And can you imagine if they had been pushed over? I mean, I can't even...
I can't imagine it either. I mean, and by the way, who'd I leave out? Elvis Presley. He recorded at RCAB. So, I mean, just imagine, and think of the history. I mean, he must have done 200 tracks at RCA Studio B, and I think he did something at A. Where I was,
well, he did Heartbreak Hotel over on McGavock Street.
Well, that was earlier.
Yeah.
On McGavock, he recorded Heartbreak Hotel.
Yeah.
I think that was in, early '56, I believe, right after he left Sun.
Mm-hmm. And so many of the movie soundtracks were Nashville pickers at RCAA, you know.
Oh, wow. I mean, just unbelievable. And that A-team, those A-team musicians.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
And you have it enshrined here. If someone wants to know the history, Don Cusick wrote a fabulous book recently called Nashville Sound. And just when I walk through the Musicians Hall of Fame, I feel the history not only of the Nashville studios, but Los Angeles and Detroit and Memphis and just everything. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I got here just in the nick of time to catch the tail end of that in the mid-'70s. So I feel really blessed that my mentor, Billy Sherrill, would allow me to hang out in the studio and watch Pig and Pete Drake and Bob Moore and all those great musicians.
And what he did in Columbia A, you know, all the things he did, David Houston and what he did with George Jones, but also, you know, Tammy Wynette. I mean, my goodness sakes, those Stand By Your Man. I mean, those records that he cut set a whole standard for the next decade.
Well, he kind of was trying to follow in Owen Bradley's shoes with the strings and everything, and did the
Charlie Rich. And we said at the same time, isn't that funny? Our minds work the same way. We said Charlie Rich.
Right, and it was
behind closed doors, right? At all.
It took it to another. It took it to another level, just like when Ray Charles did that original country.
And that was in A too, wasn't it? Didn't Ray record? Didn't he do his duet? Where did he do his duet with a couple of his duets there, Ray Charles?
He did an album there. I think the stuff that you're thinking about, with Seven Spanish Angels.
Yes,
that was at 1111 Studios.
Was that 11? Okay.
With Billy,
I have to be really careful what I say in front of you.
No, well, I was there, and so
no, I know.
So Billy produced those on.
It wasn't he great though? Wherever he produced, but most of the great things he did were in Columbia and Quonset Hut, which was called Studio B, right?
After they built A.
Yeah, and then, but he did a lot of great things in A too, didn't he?
Well, He Stopped Loving Her Today was in A.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was a #1 country song of all time.
It unbelievable, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, the Musicians Hall of Fame would not be what it is without your help and support, and in every way, and we're always indebted to you.
Well, we're proud to be in the 55th year of our record company and all the hits we've been able to have over the years, but we're even more proud of our philanthropic efforts, and most of all, to see what you've done with the Musicians Hall and this beautiful place and what it's meant to Nashville, what it's meant to our country, but also how you're preserving the history of these great, great musicians. And we're really proud to be one of your supporters and to be part of this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you next week on Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage.